I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla.
It started with a name. Not a scandal, not a leak to the press, just a name uttered in public that rewrote years of royal position. Duchess of Cornwall. That was the name the announcer used when Camilla stepped out on the red carpet of a royal gala, expecting a welcome as the queen. Cameras snapped. A few claps came slowly, but everyone felt the rippling tension in the room, kind of like static. For Camilla, the punch of the moment came instantly. Her demeanor didn't crash into panic, but it cracked enough to be noticed by the world. Behind the scenes, this was not an accident. This was an action taken with cold calculation, and the player was Princess Anne. Known for her stiff posture, sharp eyes, and unshakable commitment to the job, the woman just lines across the monarchy without raising her voice. The thing is, Anne had been watching for years, watching as Camilla, once the mistress, now the queen consort, was slowly shifting the power lines inside Buckingham Palace. It started small. A charity focus here, seating order there. But to Anne, it was obvious Camilla was not simply playing a part. She was reinventing that part piece by piece. As a result, it wasn't just annoying, it was risky. For Anne, the crown was not a costume. It was a blood obligation, a legacy not borrowed, and while Charles, the ultimate diplomat, may have blurred lines, Anne saw no such luxury, especially for lived experience with someone like Camilla, that was fraught with history with the family, a history Anne considered tainted. Camilla had always known that Anne disliked her. What she did not understand until it was too late was the depth of that dislike. While other family members would dance with conflict, Anne was calculating. She didn't gossip, she witnessed. And when she acted, she didn't act with showmanship, she acted instead with protocol. What pushed Anne to take action was the quiet insistence from Camilla to try to elevate her children into royal structures. Tom Parker BS apparently had been supposedly placed in some sort of advisory role that would have put him on sight of rooms that he had no business being in. And by traditional definition was not a royal by blood, not a royal by title, just proximity. And this was not how Anne thought the monarchy should work. This was not only about Tom. Camilla had also been pushing to change their order of precedence, which meant changing first, who walked first, who spoke when, and who sat where. These things seem ceremonial and trivial to the outside world, but to the palace they are lopped with meaning. These things were indicating to what is obvious, a goal of making the power of her part of the family more dominant within the broader monarchy. Anne had put up with enough, but rewriting the rule book had broken the camel's back. So she called for a meeting. Not invited, not suggested, demanded at Balmoral Castle, which echoed family history with every presented detail. With cold, clinical detail, emails, witnesses, subtle moves Camilla had made to act behind Anne's back, and with no press, no public announcement, Anne stripped Camilla of the queen title where it mattered and had effect, in official business. No need to seek Charles, no vote, only protocol, enforced by the sole person capable of royal credential that couldn't be argued. And that's what made it ugly. No loud, no mess, just final. Camilla didn't see it coming. For years, she thought she had won, that the whispers were over, that the title was hers. But Anne reminded her in the country, power does not always come from crowns or love stories. Sometimes power comes from the silence of the person who's been silent the longest. And wow, did the silence in this case roar. Balmoral had never had tension like this. The castle, with its thick stone walls and sprawling Scottish countryside, had always the royals' escape, just quiet, historical, untouched by the chaos of media. But this time it was the setting for a royal reckoning. Charles showed up, tired and oblivious to the storm that was brewing. Camilla appeared frustrated by the interruption, in part because she was oblivious her seat at the table was about to permanently change. Anne did not come in with a flourish. She never did. She sat down in one of the smaller drawing rooms, looked everyone in the eye, and started. No drama, no emotion, just the facts. Camilla's manipulation, her subtle changes to traditions, her growing role behind palace doors, it was all delivered with military detachment, and she spoke as a daughter of the late queen, not as a jealous sister or a spiteful rival, or any relationship would never matter, because she spoke as the backbone of the monarch. Charles attempted to interrupt, attempted to downplay the moves as harmless modernization, but Anne's look could have frozen the room. "Modernization does not involve rewriting bloodlines," she said. Camilla shifted awkwardly, or at least appeared to. Her hands clenched, her lips pressed into a tight line. For the first time in years, she no longer our account. And then Anne dropped the bomb. She produced a written directive, already signed, already circulating through internal palace channels, withdrawing Camilla's ceremonial use of the title Queen in any and all events where Charles wasn't present. Camilla would now be referred strictly to as Duchess of Cornwall. The aides in the room stiffened. Charles looked as if she had knocked the wind out of him. Camilla, pale and blinking rapidly, jumped to her feet. "You have no right," she snapped. "Anne did not even blink. I have our mother's trust. That's more than enough." The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla shrieked and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle a nearby candelabra. Charles stayed frozen, hands limp in his lap, eyes heavy with regret. Anne, as always, took no time to enjoy the applause. She stood, straightened her coat, and left without ceremony. The fallout was immediate and methodical. Internal memos circulated. Scripts were reworked. Event managers were given new instructions. There was no press release, no communication from the palace, just a muted and undeniable change in the introduction of Camilla's future appearances. The first public occasion was a much-anticipated fundraiser gala. Camilla walked out in diamonds and velvet, on the arms of Charles, her demeanor much hyped. She smiled for the cameras, but she could not hide her eyes. The announcer took center stage, calm, rehearsed, and detached voice reverberating through the receptors of the ballroom. The Duchess of Cornwall gasps. Handphones went up. Camilla didn't move for half a second, suspended between grace and incredulity. And then there was applause. Half-hearted, sticky fascination, hesitant, shunned, greeted. A royal poised, trusted friend. Nothing for it but to nod with polite checked surprise and move towards the center stage. The cameras locked solidly on without preferential support. Every place nuance of the exchange. Back inside Clarence's house, Camilla had begun to unravel. She shouted, threw a crystal decanter at the fireplace, accused aides of betrayal. Had someone found out, demanded names, engaged in public retractions. But there was nothing to retract. The shift had been no accident. It had been the aim of some villain, and everyone knew the villain, and even Charles, the man torn between what love demands and what legacy longings insist he should feel, could not find the will to turn it back, not without turning the family against itself, not after William and Catherine quietly endorsed Anne by saying nothing at all. After all, silence can sometimes scream louder than support. That night, for the first time, after a long time, Camilla came to a staggering realization that being queen was not about the title, it was about being accepted, and she had just been rejected. Charles had retreated to his private study, surrounded by imposing bookshelves and faded portraits of monarchs who had worn the crown before him. The air was thick, not with dust, but with indecision. His wife had been demoted, but it had not gotten by without a public demoting. His sister had acted and left him behind to deal with the consequences. The kingdom, though silent, had chosen its side in a non-verbal but undeniably chosen side. Charles paced for hours between his duty to his blood and loyalty to the woman he had gone to so much trouble to legitimize. The sentiment weighed heavily, while deep down he knew Camilla had crossed a line, and Anne had only drawn the line. Behind the walls of the palace, the shift was obvious. Staff who formerly treated Camilla with royal homage now reverted to stiff formality. Her office, now formerly known as Queen Consort, now had brass placard with her former title. But royal schedules had begun to show her appearances in a new light. The media took caution to create buzz about interest, not conflict, and followed the palace lead with tacit consequences. The phenomena was changing in a subtle yet forever manner. So was Camilla. She withdrew. Her once active calendar began to thin. Once found regularly at Charles's side, she began missing minor engagements and citing health or schedule conflict. Behind closed doors, she may have been furious, but the exhaustion was beginning to trump her rage. She devoted decades clawing her way into the good graces of the monarchy with notable personal sacrifices. Through public scandals, backlash, and sordid mediated presser, all to be undone by one phrase insisted of her at some gala. It cut deeper than anything any tabloids had previously printed. Her children noticed. Tom steered clear, not daring to ascertain what role, if any, was still permitted in palace matter. Laura simply no longer exhibiting any zeal to attend any engagements. Camilla's aspirations for her family had clashed head-on with centuries of subtle norms, and Anne had made sure the norms were enforced. Anne went about her business just as before, attending functions and engagements with her trademark stoicism, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, and making no remarks. But in palace circles, there was a tacit acknowledgement that something momentous had occurred. She hadn't just rescinded a title, she had reaffirmed what it meant to have a title. And it wasn't lost on William. He and Catherine had maintained an appearance of neutrality in public, but privately William sent a message to his father, its meaning unmistakable. We protect the crown, not personalities. It stung. Charles had always thought he could modernize the monarchy with one foot in tradition, while allowing compassion a seat at the table. But William had no time for sentimentalism, and he was preparing for the future. William's future did not include personal accommodation. With the family fractured and the institution wobbling after a long, slow decline, there was an eerie silence that descended on the monarchy. There were no interviews, no press rebuttals, just silence and something else. Change. Camilla kept joining Charles on the meaningful occasions of state, but as public interest waned, her presence became more background than center stage. Her influence over household matters became lessened. Her negotiating position at royal planning meetings became quieter. She had not been exiled, but she had been removed strategically. For Charles, the fallout was more pronounced. He showed signs of aging. Once lively in public, he seemed strangely subdued, not pensive, just empty. The man that finally sat on the throne seemed to have lost the desire to fight for ownership of it. Anne's move was quiet, but it broke something in him. Something he didn't know was fragile until it splintered. But for Hannah, it was not about winning. It was about resetting. She subscribed to the monarch's framework expressly and not its marketing. In her mind, the moment called for a correction, not a reprisal, not a show, just order. And she met it with the same poise and discipline she had practiced her whole life. And the crown ultimately remained intact, not because of charm, not because of a column, but because one woman determined some things were worth saving. Camilla was still at the side of the king, but the nature of royalty was rebacked to its intended acts, quietly, endlessly, and without a word.